Heads up, this is going to be a bit of a weird video because everything about the Picts is pretty ambiguous and there's not much known about them. The Picts were a Celtic civilization living in and around this part of Scotland from early as Roman times. Later on they merged with the Gaels of West Scotland and became the Scots. Like many of the Celtic civilizations, they did not keep many written records and had an oral tradition instead. That means we have either pretty unreliable oral accounts passed through the generations or written records from outsiders like the Romans. So most of our knowledge about the Picts is based on archaeology and some pretty educated guesses. In fact, historians don't really agree on who the Picts were, where they came from, and how they lived. The earliest records of the Picts we get from the Romans, who describe several different tribes living in Scotland. We actually get the word Pict from the Romans, who called them the Picti tribe, meaning painted people. More on that later. It's important to note when studying the Picts that they weren't really a united force, rather lots of different tribes sharing a similar cultural identity. They did have Pictish high kings, but they were usually just simply the most powerful king, usually the kingdom of Fort Triu in modern Moray. Interestingly, the Pictish kingship would be passed through matrilineally, meaning that the succeeding king would still be male, but it would be passed through the maternal family, so someone like a brother, cousin, or nephew. In terms of culture and mythology, not much is actually known, but it's likely pretty similar to the common Celtic mythology shared across the peoples of northwestern Europe, including the Gauls, Gaels, and Britons. However, there were likely some pretty large regional differences, so it's important not to assume too much. In terms of lifestyle, a typical Pict was most likely a farmer, and many practiced transhumance, a sort of semi-nomadic method of farming based on the seasons. The Picts raised livestock, fished, and went hunting with dogs and falcons. And recent evidence has even shown that they had water mills. Some Picts closer to the sea were described as being merchants/pirates, which sounds a bit of a weird mix, but I guess they could just switch between them when it suited them. There's a famous depiction of the Picts being tattooed, but there's not as much evidence for this as you would think. There is a bit of evidence which suggests that blue face paint was used by both males and females to terrify enemies in war, and it's why the Romans called them the painted people, Picti. They were also amazing metal craftsmen. They made chains, horns, and weird horse armor type things. The Picts really were an amazing culture. They flourished in the cold, harsh landscape of Scotland. The Picts lived through times of great change. Christianity started being introduced in around 450 CE, and the Vikings even invaded and settled their lands in around the 800 CE. And in around the 11th century, they merged with the originally Irish Gaels who had formed the Dalriata in the west of Scotland, and together they made the Scots nation. So you can see why it's an important part of Scotland's history. Hopefully this has given you a quick introduction to Pictish history and culture. In the next video I'll be exploring an unexcavated Pictish settlement, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.